500 then. Never going to be a $100 billion company. If you don't get these customers, you can't be a $100 billion company. It's impossible. You hit a wall every time. I told one of my VC friends this over the weekend in Miami, because he loves these companies that grow so fast, right? I want a company that grows 15 million% in the first year. Okay, cool. And then they're just going to decelerate for the next 10 years. So that's fine. But the point is that you can't sustain that growth. And I don't even know if that growth is healthy for companies, because you can't hire fast enough, good people anyway. It's not good for the culture. It's sporadic. My point is that these are two different models, right? But I just think that it's very important to recognize that. And it's very important when you're an investor, you're looking, okay, it's going to be slower, these enterprise companies, but they do have a chance to get to $100 billion. They do, because that's where the budget is. That's exactly where the budget is.
Hello and welcome to Fireside with a VC. My name is Andrew Romans, and today we're with Brendan Card, who is the CEO and founder of Terzo, which is a very hot AI company that we were good enough to get some of our fund capital into in supporting them. So Terzo is one of our portfolio companies. We're going to talk about what Terzo does, but we're also going to have a broader conversation about where AI is in the enterprise and some of the dynamics on adoption of AI. Brendan is an ex-Microsoft guy who knows enterprise products and enterprise sales in and out, and is in the front trenches of AI truly being adopted. So Brendan, great to see you, man. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to see you too, Andrew. Long overdue. Pleasure to be here. Excited to chat.
Yeah.
Thanks
I'm looking forward to seeing you in person at your Miami event coming up on April 20th.
Me too. Really looking forward to it. It's been a while, so.
Yeah. So let's start with Terzo. So maybe explain, what does Terzo do and where does it live in the enterprise?
So Terzo is an enterprise AI contract intelligence platform. So what we do is we extract metadata from supplier contracts, for example, for very large enterprise companies, and put analytics around all of that data to show them where they're spending money across different categories, to show them all the terms and conditions and clauses inside the contract, and to have a full 360 view of all that spend across their supply chain.
Okay, so maybe walk us through a concrete example of like the Home Depot. I mean, if anyone's ever been into a Home Depot, it's like Carrefour, for one of these kind of places. They are buying bolts and nails from somebody. They're buying power tools. They're buying doors, chandeliers. How many contracts does the Home Depot have? Do you even know?
So no, we actually don't know. They don't know exactly, but it's in the hundreds of thousands active contracts, and we manage a very large segment of the categories across, a variety of different categories such as IT and logistics. But when you look at all of the things they're purchasing across what they call direct procurement and indirect procurement, it's, millions of different SKUs, and there's a lot of suppliers. There's a lot of things that are not on contract, just on invoice. And when you look at a company like Home Depot, or even you look at a company like Target, for example, right, those kind of companies, they still work with suppliers who send paper invoices.
Yeah.
So that's still happening, and you'd be surprised at the number, right, of that still happening. So it's a really complex supply chain. We cover a very big segment of it, thousands and thousands of contracts that are billions of dollars a year in renewal value. And what we're helping Home Depot do is understand all those categories and make sure that they are proactive with every single contract that's renewing. And oftentimes it could be hundreds of millions of dollars renewing per month across a few different departments. So it's significant dollars.
And so there's things in these contracts, for example, I can imagine, you've got, are we paying these guys net 90? Are we paying them net 60? Are we paying them net 360? And when is the contract up for renegotiation? And if you had to have a human read 100,000 contracts?
It's not possible to scale with humans. Two, there's a real interesting paradigm shift when it comes to contract data, and this is important for investors more than anyone else, because companies know this is happening. So for last 25 years, contracts have been managed by the legal teams, and they've been using legal software like CLM category. Think about iCertis or DocuSign or Ironclad, and these solutions are great for lawyers and legal teams. They're basically repositories where you can do templating and drafting. These were never adopted by finance, procurement, supply chain, IT, the people that are actually running the business and the operations, worried about the dollars. They never use these systems. They've always used like OneDrive or G Drive or Box, whatever it is, to store their files. A lot of stuff lives in email. So one of the biggest challenges that all these enterprises have, and this whole it's a change in mindset, is that lawyers have had these contracts hidden away behind the firewall forever, and now the business units need them to make financial decisions. And there's a whole new category of software out there, which is the category we're in around enterprise AI and analytics on top of all of this data, right? And it happens to be document data. But we also can do other transactional data too. But the point is that business teams are demanding a solution because of all the dollars and financial obligations that are baked into these PDFs. And when you look at terms, you're right, customers are looking, wait, I have 40 contracts with the same supplier. Why am I net 30 in some contracts? Why am I net 90 in other contracts?
And does that even match the invoice? Is somebody screwing up, and am I benefiting, or am I the loser on that discrepancy?
Exactly, right? And then you talk about the next step to say, hey, I just committed $10 million to this vendor for X, Y, and Z, and then you get the invoice to see if that actually matches up with the contract you signed. So we're analyzing both documents. We're reading both documents and creating a data foundation, structured data that's 99% accurate because we have humans in the loop. So our customers can actually trust that data. And that's the difference with Terzo and what we're doing, is that we're using proprietary AI that we built ourselves. We're not using an LLM. Go there in a second. And we have an application that our customers can use out of the box to get the analytics they need, because ultimately our customers are trying to make financial decisions. And that's what we do. We pull out really important financial data and terms, obligations that can impact you financially.
And you don't have to be, the Home Depot is a good starting example because it's so obvious that anyone who's been in the store, how many contracts they have to manage all that. And when you have the data lives in the contract, that PDF, it lives in the invoice, which could be different. And there could be other documentation back and forth, right? And even just when do they all renew, it's a lot to manage. But if you look at Cisco or even a Fortune 500 company, I remember I used to enjoy having lunch at Google, at least once a month on campus. And I remember hearing that the mayor of Menlo Park was complaining that Google serves more plates of meals per day than all of the restaurants of Menlo Park combined.
That's right.
So a company like Google or a company like Cisco may not be as obvious as the Home Depot with the products and services that they sell are from so many vendors. But if you're
even more dollars in contracts, which is this is not secret information. Cisco's a public company. They talk about it all the time. Stock's up. They're doing very well now because of this AI trend, which is great to see. The great company and a lot of great people there. Cisco has a variety of spend across just their global procurement team, but they're spending approximately $13 billion a year just across global procurement. And when you look at that $13 billion spend, it's a lot of different categories. It's a lot of different categories, but the bulk of it, you could probably say half of it is OpEx, which is around people, software, services, professional services, for example, all the different things they're using to run the business, marketing agencies. And then you have facilities. Then you have physical suppliers. They actually make their hardware and their routers and all their networking systems, and they have a huge, massive supply chain overseas. And then they have, real estate, massive real estate portfolio in every country. They basically have an office. They're buying things for every office in every country.
Yeah, I mean, they're stocking the fridge, they're cleaning latrines. I mean, you have 17,000 employees, if anything like that, and
yeah, they have 108,000, whatever it is, right, employees. So you can just see in the financials that there's billions and billions of dollars to spend everywhere just to run basic operations. So that's what we're helping with, is to figure out all that supplier spend, all those contracts. There's thousands and thousands of contracts that are being signed every year. How do we put analytics around that so they can make smarter decisions, do faster reporting, and then here in the very short term, ask questions to this data, get answers very quickly, get reports really quickly. And the key for the customer is that a lot of our customers that we're trying to help every day are reporting into the CFO office, or they're reporting into the COO office of big publicly traded companies. And the reality is they need answers quickly. Yeah. Someone sends them an email, someone hits them on Slack, someone hits them on Teams. Hey, I need this report. Oh, scramble. Then they got to go, hey, where's that contract? Where's that file? Where's that invoice? They got to go through all these systems, SAP, Oracle, Coupa, all these different platforms. They're just not built to give you answers quickly. That's just
Yeah. I mean, look, I think right now, from our perspective as a venture firm, invest in startups that do the work that would have required over 1,000 people and do it with technology. And you can price that software at a point that's either saving money or making more money for your customer. But in a way, you guys are almost like Doge for the enterprise.
we are like Doge for the enterprise. I've been saying this before Doge, obviously, because no one, we've been going in and saying cost optimization. We've been working with consulting partners to go in and do these huge cost cutting, a type of, you know, activities. That's basically what a lot of our customers are doing. They're trying to trim and be as efficient as they can across every single department in the world. And these companies are huge. They have 90, 100, 200 P&Ls, really complex organizations that have grown through acquisitions over the years. So think about all that historical data too that needs to be, needs to be understood. But this is, I always tell investors too, because I love my VC friends. And I just said, look, here's the reality, right? Most of the VCs that are legend VCs, they were all in the similar deals. And that's great. And a lot of it was B2C. A lot of it was B2C and a lot of it was SMB mid-market. And that's like 90% of the whole entire group of people is like B2C and mid-market and SMB. Then you have a small subset that actually understands like Fortune 500 type of sale, through enterprise plays, government type of plays, Palantir type of plays. It's just a different type of business, very different type of business. And I tell people that all the time. ServiceNow, for example, $250 billion company right now, but they grew at 40% year over year for like 20 years and no one talked about them.
I knew those guys. They were living and working out of a house in Santa Cruz. I knew them from the Founders Club.
Exactly, right? And they solve the problem that's so sticky and so it's such a utility at these companies that they can't rip and replace it and they don't want to because it's an important part of their workflow daily. And what we're saying is that, hey, we're trying to build that same exact moat, that same exact go-to-market for the contract data and keep users in our system with all that contract data constantly renewing these contracts, managing these contracts, reporting on these contracts. And we're going across departments too, similar to ServiceNow, but you won't see the hockey stick crazy growth because we're in deals with the Fortune 100 and the Fortune 500 mostly. So the challenge with them as an investor, as investors know, the reason why investors get scared of the enterprise, and I don't blame them, is because you have to get in the budget cycle for next year. Like for example, the largest airline in the world, 3-year contract with us, Delta, right? Okay. People know that because they were Engage Ventures, of course, and Engage Ventures has a lot of LPs, and Delta's one of the LPs, so is Home Depot. They have a great list of LPs in the Atlanta region. And they were really helpful early on when we went through that accelerator program, incubator program, 2022. And we landed a 3-year deal with Delta. We're super proud about that, right? And we know that no matter what, a company like Delta can't budget, they couldn't just budget $20 million for Terzo next year. Doesn't matter how magical our tech is. We could have the tech that's out of this world and they can just budget $20 million for a new vendor Terzo next year, right? Even they have
So how do you do it?
Tested. So what you do is you work all year to get in the budget for next year. And you build the business case all this year to get in budgets when they do September budgeting for next year. That's just how these corporations work. This is how the healthcare companies work. This is how pharma and biotech work. Retailers do all their budgeting right now. So what your secret is that you need to get in the budget cycle for next year and figure out how to maximize budget for next year because companies can only move so fast. And if you look at the historical data, and I look at a lot of these revenue and income statements over the years, these companies in the enterprise, including Palantir, right, still growing at that like 40% clip for a while, and then they trimmed down to like 30%. But it's compounding, and it's a different model, but it's long-term sustainability, and it's multi-year customers. So when I look at, our ARR, for example, when we go into our Series B, the quality of ARR is extremely important. A lot of investors neglect it. A lot of investors are like, what's your ARR? Well, more importantly, look at the contracts and then figure out what the ARR is because 5 million ARR is not always equal. Okay.
Yeah, and Delta as an example takes a year to get into their almost Japanese sales cycle, meaning slow, and then you get a 3-year contract.
It's more than 1 year sales cycle. You get a 3-year contract, and then my point is that you get into these organizations, as you know, whether it's Delta or Home Depot or Blue Cross Blue Shield or Cisco Systems, or it could be companies from all different verticals. The key is that you get in, you solve a problem, you solve a very important use case with a tangible ROI.
Right. That's what I always liked. I mean, so many founders talk about how their technology could do everything at Delta. You had like a nice wedge point of a very clear wedge point of I can look at all those contracts, and you would have to pay Accenture so much, so many humans, so many hours to do what we can do for you,
They
like
just
near instantly.
the key is that like they understood what our tech was before. We talked about the document extraction. We talked about the ability to read these complex documents, and then they had a supply chain, use case, and then we focused just on that use case, and then we got really specific about our model for Delta. Right now, I'm going to tell you a word that my friend Arjun Prasad. I don't know if you know Arjun Prasad, but he's a very active investor. One of the early, actually, you talked about Uber earlier. He's one of the earliest investors in Uber. That's his claim to fame. But yeah, he's an amazing guy. Anyways, we were talking about this idea in Dubai. You got to give him credit for this brilliant idea, the small expert model. Instead, everyone's obsessed with the large language model because that's what mainstream media is pumping to everybody. Hey, large language model. Okay, great. Now they're all going to be. I said this 2 years ago. They're all going to be at parity very, very soon, and they are. Gemini is really good. OpenAI is fantastic. Grok 3 is also very good. Claude, Mistral, they're very good too. I just saw this other LLM in Dubai that these guys created, Hanuman, the best engineers from India and the Middle East. Unbelievable capabilities, the LLM, right? They built their own. That's a great solution that people need, but the LLM is not necessary for, need to drop a bomb on these ants problems that our customers have and use all that electricity, use all that compute power for what? And all that cost doesn't make any sense. So these guys are, and we're working on things like this too, is building a small expert model for each customer. And we have neural nets, and that's the difference with Terzo too that I told investors early on, is that we weren't even using an LLM. We don't need an LLM for anything we're doing with the extraction and all that review of the data that we pull out of these documents. We can put an LLM on top and do additional things, but we don't need it. It's not necessary. And the truth is that we can use any LLM, OpenAI, Google Gemini, doesn't matter. They're all very good. And they all have great APIs, and they all have great engineering teams, and they're all trillion-dollar companies, mostly trillion-dollar companies. So you're like, okay, yeah, you have a lot of good options here. So we're going to partner and use whatever tech that our customers want. That's a commodity solution, just like infrastructure. We're running on Azure, we're running AWS. We're on OpenAI for LLM. We're also run IBM Watson's Gen AI right now too, if customers want that. We give our customers whatever they want, but the underlying extraction and all of that processing of really complex data into the analytics is all proprietary, and that's what we continue to focus on.
Let's talk a little bit about the adoption of AI in large enterprises, Fortune 100, Fortune 500, where your focus is. I mean, like you were saying, a lot of people play with OpenAI at home, writing a love poem to their spouse, and then they expect to see that working in the enterprise. And maybe it's not. What is the uptake and adoption of how much AI is in dev versus in production?
Yeah, so that's
the guys you deal with.
Two important pieces there. This is actually a really good topic to talk about. I talk about this, with people recently, because it's changed very recently. I would say in the last 6 months. And in our lives, as we're seeing, everything's changing faster. Stocks are going up faster, going down faster. Just there's rapid frequency and change now for some reason on this planet. So we're seeing this with customers too. Are probably running approximately 2% of their AI budget is in production, maybe 5%. The rest of it's R&D based on the data. If you look at the data, Gartner says this too. I think McKinsey says this too. If you look at 100% of the enterprise AI spend, they said 98% of it was still non-production. It's 2% across the whole sample size. They're saying is in production. I mean, I can believe that though, because everything is not running in a production environment. It's all just test. And IBM Watson, they'll tell you for years. It's not a secret. IBM Watson's been doing most of the Watson deals that have been done are all R&D. I mean, I love IBM Watson, right? But here's the truth. A lot of stuff's not being used in these production deployments. And that's what we're working towards. That's what we're all working towards. But the point is at Terzo, no one does Terzo test dev. There's no, we'll give you a sandbox. So the whole point is get Terzo in production as soon as possible so you can figure out where money's going. Right? So my point is that that's something that we love, but what we see in the industry Palantir in production, yes. Scale AI in production, yes. All these other things, science projects, not in production. And I'll tell you why they're not in production. This is the second reason. InfoSec, legal teams have a lot of power in these organizations because they oftentimes are representing the board, especially the GC of these public companies. They have a lot of risk and a lot of responsibility and a lot of compliance to worry about. And they're oftentimes not ready to approve the use of this AI in production environments. And that's typically what it comes down to is the lawyers, the contracting teams, procurement, and InfoSec together not approving this. And that's a huge barrier. So the challenge that all these legal teams have now, I mean, it's happening today. I just had a meeting this morning. I'm having a meeting this weekend. It's happening with our customers right now, is that users come in from home and they get on the computer and they're like, hey, I want to ask questions to this document. I want to build a report. I want to get a summary. I want to do all this fun stuff like ChatGPT at work. Why would I not be able to do this at work? My kids are doing this in their 9th grade and I can't do this in my job and make $500,000 a year. What the hell's going on? They're confused, right? And then we have to tell them, and then we have to bridge the gap to their InfoSec legal team and say, hey, our contract explicitly says we're not allowed to run any generative AI in your environment, on your data. And then the legal teams will say on the call, yep, no Gen AI, absolutely not approved. And then occasionally you'll get the teams that are like, yes, we'll start like the approval process, but it's going to be very long and it's going to go through a risk committee. And that's what's happening through all the deals we're winning recently and all the deals we're about to win in the next 2-3 weeks. We're going through very thorough risk risk assessments, basically like Mark Zuckerberg in front of, the Senate is what's happening with Terzo, with customers.
And you already talked about this, but what is the range of sales cycle? And what are you finding? Like, are you figuring out if Tom Siebel was like the original guru who trained bakeoff on enterprise sales, now you're dealing with AI sales with Gen AI in it and all these barriers. And it's like, in Japan, it's always wait for April, and they lose a whole year for no reason. Whereas the Chinese are moving at warp speed.
Yeah.
How do you see the sales cycle evolving or changing?
It's a really good
maybe that's your moat. Maybe that's part of your moat.
So the sales cycle is, unfortunately, generally speaking, it's still long, enterprise sales cycle, if I'm being very honest. But there are cases where you can get a 3-month, sales cycle and win a deal. That's 6 figures. Most of our deals, 90% of our deals are 6 figures. The sales cycle naturally is going to be longer, but we have gotten really big organizations to move in 3 months. We are seeing some customers move in 6 months, but when you're working with a global Fortune 100, typically it's just going to take over a year because there's a lot of departments that need to approve this because we're going, like I said, right into production, and everyone in the company needs to know about it. Needs to be signed off by the very top. Sometimes it's in the board reviews. We get to the boardroom, believe it or not, Terzo gets to the boardroom. I always laugh. I'm like, how does little startup Terzo get to the boardroom this early? Wow. Because we're putting contract data in the cloud. The contract data's got a lot of secrets in there. There's a lot of stuff in those contracts. So customers, they got to know where's this going? And it's in Azure. And it can be in an Azure private cloud. And they can have the keys. So we set all that up years ago because we knew we were going into this tough enterprise game. And we designed the company for that, right? So we've been saying no to a lot of these smaller deals and smaller customers because it's like we're trying to serve a beverage company that operates in 200 countries. And they have contracts in 200 countries. So we're trying to figure out how do we serve that customer for the next 10 years? How do we get Cisco globally, right? That's the kind of like business that we're in. So it's just the sales cycles are very long, and I'm trying to figure out how to use AI, trying to figure out how to, use a lot of different technology to shorten sales cycles. But that is always the question, right? What happens in the sales cycles? I can tell you have changed. Tom Siebel's legend, of course, bakeoff too. Guys are incredible, but they'll even tell you. Inboxes have amazing AI cybersecurity protection, like abnormal security, defending the inbox, right? And then we're sending AI to the AI. AI is fighting with each other. Nothing's getting through. The humans, at yoga, hanging out or walking their dog or something, right? So that's the other thing I'll tell you too. And this is a topic. This is a real podcast and you're Andrew Roman, so we can say this. I've never, I've been in the workforce between Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, and then now Terzo CEO, 15 years. So that's my sample size, right? To be fair, 15 years, not crazy. But still, in 15 years, I've never seen the lack of like ambition of people at work across the board, these different companies. Everyone that works from home, I don't think can work from home. And I think they work like 2 hours a day. I think they read their email, then they go off and walk and go to class and go to Whole Foods and go like hang out with their friends. That's what I see happening across the world. I finally, I think it's about to change. But that has been the biggest thing I've noticed because people are getting, I don't know if it's AI is making them lazier. I don't know if people are just like, oh, this work from home, they can't handle it. But I can tell you that here's the cold hard truth. Here's the truth that investors need to know too. Smart CEOs are all trying to figure out how Elon's doing this with X and cutting 80% of the staff and how all these companies cut all their people. That's what they're all trying to figure out right now. They're all trying to say, how do I cut 80% of my team and keep a revenue flat and not lose customers? That's what every...
Yeah, I mean, Zuckerberg finally cut some team a couple years ago, and the stock was rewarded insanely. And everybody saw that happen. And then even before Elon went and did a 80% chainsaw to, or whatever it was, to Twitter X.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, even us on a smaller scale, we're trying to we had a lot of engineers. Why? Because we had to hire a lot of engineers to make this tech work for the enterprise, and we had to get SOC 1, SOC 2, all these different certifications, had to run multiple clouds. It was just a different, type of house we had to build. We had to spend a lot more on engineering up front, and we had to hire a lot more people. Then we became definitely more lean now, but we're basically going to be at 60 people when we were at 2 million ARR, then we were 5 million ARR, and then when we're at 10 million ARR, probably still be at 60 people. So we've kind of figured out, okay, how we can be very, very lean and effective and not have to overhire, and where we can optimize. And that's one thing we're focused on too, is revenue per employee. And we think that metric's going to be, that's the future metric that people are going to be looking at, revenue per employee, right? So that's also a thing that's popping up everywhere.
Cisco, by the way, is always spoken in those terms, revenue per employee. John Chambers historically is always, beat his chest about that metric.
It's a good metric for now.
Well, it's interesting to have, a company built today versus a company built 5 years ago that went through its 2021 August mega round, where they didn't need that money. They didn't need to raise 75 or 150 million, and because it was on offer, they took it. And they started hiring people that they didn't necessarily need. So it's almost like the reverse of Doge. It's just like you're turning into a bloated over team. When you're talking about AI, speaking to AI and email, like we're seed investors in Superhuman, and they've started revealing more of what they're really doing, where, someone like me can say, send me your email, and I can have the AI immediately from Superhuman read their email and say, could you tell me what your monthly recurring revenue is? And could you share like some historical metrics? And I could be on the beach hanging out with you, visiting you in Miami, while my email, or just on vacation, my email is going back and forth and getting to we're going to pass on you, please come back when you hit to 1 million ARR or something.
Wow.
And so we can set workflows.
That's going to be cool.
And then the AI gets better at it. So what ends up happening is that somebody emails me pretty soon. It'll be AI asking them questions, and then it goes back and forth. The question becomes, when the other party has got AI speaking to our AI over email.
Yeah, if it's the same model, then it's going to get along just fine, probably, right?
Right. It's like some circular reference in Excel that's crashing your...
I laugh about this too. I'm like, basically what's going on in the world is just a bunch of very intelligent humans training robots to act like humans on both sides. And it's just going to be like, it's going to be like a nice video game. It's going to be more of a simulation. It's going to be more of a simulation than it already is, which is actually quite shocking. So
yeah, well, the thing is, every CEO of a large ship or a small ship wants to optimize the cash in and cash out of their business. And if you get to a certain size, you need computers to do the work that humans historically would be incapable of doing. And that's where you reimagine workflows, right? How do you see, switching gears, I think of you as like an enterprise guy. How do you see Terzo's journey in a landscape of startups and VCs on being so heavy enterprise versus consumer?
yeah,
And do you see a consumerization of the enterprise in a way?
Yeah, I was laughing about this too because I'm like, I've been in the enterprise since I was very young, even before I graduated from undergrad. When I was doing internships, I was doing, biz dev. It was all B2B. It was all big company to big company. So I don't know why I just kind of got stuck in that world, but I feel so I know that world. I know the customer, and the way I think about it, this is what I always tell my team when I'm recruiting talent, and I haven't, been out there recruiting our senior executives recently because we have the same team that I brought on in 2020, right? So I'm very proud of that. We have the same leadership team. And when I was selling these amazing people to come join us, I said, you know why I'm going after the Fortune 100? Because they said, this is scary. Fortune 100 is scary. These deals are slow. Customers take, it's hard to work with. I'm like, yeah, I know. But the reason why I'm going after is because when I was at Microsoft, I learned something very important. That if you look at the entire spend across the world for all just enterprise IT, because there's a TAM there that Gartner carves out right now, which is $5 trillion. $5 trillion of annual spend. And you look at the Fortune 100, they're spending more than 90% of it.
Yeah, it's like Citi Ventures. If you talk to Citi Ventures, all they even have to do is put somebody in a chair outside of the IT department if they're paying for some software. The total number of technical people that work at Bank of America is
insane. Just these banks. You look at JPM, right? JP Morgan's spending, it's public information too, $15 billion a year just on IT. Bank of America spending like $14 billion a year. Amazon spending $30 billion a year. Microsoft spending $40 billion a year, whatever it is. So you look at the spend and the Fortune 500. If you add the 500 in there, the Fortune 500, they spend more money than the entire SMB and mid-market combined. And then if you look at the companies that actually make it above $100 billion of market cap, and people say, these companies were really never that hot, and they're definitely not hot right now. But if you look at the companies that make it above $100 billion in market cap, Adobe, Oracle, Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, SAP, IBM, on and on and on. Common theme there. They all sell to the Fortune 100. And then if you go down, Palantir, by the way, is in there too. Now, Palantir, Fortune 100 as well. That's why I knew Palantir was going to be amazing years ago, because they're owning that budget. Now, if you go down market, you get into all these hot companies. These companies were all hot for a while, whether it was the UiPath or whether it was Automation Anywheres or whether it was Okta. Or these companies were all like really hot at their time. They're great solutions, great companies, but they're having a lot of trouble just capturing that Fortune 500 budget. Same thing happened in Slack. I saw it live in person because I was responsible for Microsoft Teams when Slack and us were battling, when Slack put out that thing in the newspaper about, Microsoft not understanding this, right? So the thing is that Microsoft, okay, we'll box you out of the Fortune 500 then. Never going to be a $100 billion company. If you don't get these customers, you can't be a $100 billion company. It's impossible. You hit a wall every time. I told one of my VC friends this over the weekend in Miami, because he loves these companies that grow so fast, right? I want a company that grows 15 million% in the first year. Okay, cool. Then they're just going to decelerate for the next 10 years. So that's fine. But the point is that you can't sustain that growth. And I don't even know if that growth is healthy for companies, because you can't hire fast enough. Good people anyway. It's not good for the culture. It's sporadic. My point is that these are two different models, right? But I just think that it's very important to recognize that. And it's very important when you're an investor, you're looking, okay, it's going to be slower, these enterprise companies, but they do have a chance to get to $100 billion. They do, because that's where the budget is. That's exactly where the budget.
Do you think that there's any, you're almost saying the opposite of what I hear sometimes, where people say there's some AI czar at this Fortune 100 company who has maybe been hanging out at Whole Foods and not doing a lot from his work from home setup, and needs to show their boss. And the boss is saying, hey, AI czar, show me you did something this month. And so he's like, all right, I'll pay for all 3 startups that are competing in the same space. And sometimes when we're doing due diligence on the startup, I'm like, I want to speak to your customer and say, did they just buy it because they wanted to do something, or are they really using it? And did they buy from your 2 competitors as well, just to show that they're doing something as the AI czar?
Oh, the AI czar. Sounds like, see, I don't.
Your situation sounds like the opposite.
So, that does happen. That's called, bakeoff POCs, but that happens all the time. There's a lot of POCs happening, right? And that's where a lot of ARR revenue is coming from these companies. They do a month-to-month POC. We have those deals too, but very few of them. I break it out what are multi-year deals, and they're all, there's a big difference in POC month-to-month testing the product, which is what they do with 3 vendors. 3 or 4 vendors probably to do bake-offs.
Right. That's what we find on our GD calls.
Yeah, they do that all the time.
Yeah.
These companies bake off, and then they decide later on if there's actually going to be adoption, and then they put money behind it, because remember, there's always an HR component to putting money behind these projects to getting them deployed into a production environment. So they actually have to staff up, and on paper they have to have money allocated for it. But we run into the czar that says no AI. That's the czar we run into all the time, is the actual, like, the sheriff, the AI sheriff in these companies that's responsible for saying no to all AI. And then
It's a blocker.
we have to get friendly with the sheriff. Yeah, it's the blocker. And then we go present to the sheriff and their team for 6 months and have hearings, basically, about how we built our entire AI and, like, show them everything. And then we walk through a bunch of legal things. I mean, we have 2 in-house GCs, a lot of experience at the company right now, because this is what we're facing off with all day. But we think it's worth it, because once we get in, we're family.
Yeah, you're giving me bad flashbacks to being in Paris. I went into France Telecom Orange with Accenture, and then this guy pulled me aside saying, "You need to come in here with Cap Gemini, not guys from Chicago, you idiot."
Yeah.
And then at one point, we were lowering their customer support phone calls for broadband we could show them we could save you over 2 billion euros. What do you want to pay for deflecting all these calls? And this guy said, "Andrew, you're so American that you think they care about saving 2 billion euros. That was your number one mistake. What you need to understand is the politics here of who's trying to kill who inside of Orange. And then you'll be successful." And I was just like, oh my God, this is really complicated.
Very. Oh, it's very complicated. So that's honestly if people ask me, what do you do as a CEO all day? Well, the majority of what I'm doing is working with these very large global companies, legal, compliance, infosec teams, and gathering the appropriate data they need and walking through a lot of questions and a lot of questionnaires and having a lot of meetings to give them everything they need before making a decision and bringing it to a committee to get it approved. And that's the process to get, your AI into these budgets. And that's just,
look, at the end of the day, if it's Walmart versus Kmart, and Walmart is using Terzo and Kmart is not, they're just gonna dust Kmart. And so they have to figure out how to speed up their adoption of such transformational money saving, optimizing their whole business.
I tell people this too, Andrew, on a small scale, right? But I'm an operator, obviously. I have 60 employees plus, and I have executives here that are running real departments. So it's like I'm tracking things too. I understand. I'm worried about contract data too. I'm worried about the suppliers we're paying for. I'm worried about the partner deals. I'm worried about the revenue deals we're signing, obligations. So normally, what I would have to go do in a standard world, especially even like 10 years ago, I would go out and hire CPA, controller, finance, FP&A person, and probably some other guy, then the full-time CFO, probably 5 people on that team just giving me the data, right? Just reports on, okay, here's the partner contracts, here's all the data in the contracts, risk, here's all the renewals happen, here's all our customer deals, here's all our supplier spend, breaking out the categories, seeing the AWS spend, Azure spend, all that kind of stuff, right? We didn't have the luxury of being able to go out and hire those kind of back office roles, so what do? Used Terzo for it. That was one of the reasons why we got some of these modules built out. So we use it in-house, and I'm still using it to do a lot of my spend reporting and contract tracking and all of that. So I can get really important data quickly myself as a CEO, and I can get it out to people, especially when we run through an audit, right? We do an audit. I had a lot of data right there in Terzo. And I tell these people, at a massive scale, like, you have 400 people in the back office doing this manual data work. This is crazy. You don't need 400 people. You need like 12. And they're realizing that, right? So the meetings are definitely.
Yeah, I can imagine in France Telecom, you'd be hitting some like Teleperformance was noticing that we could deflect 80% of their calls and shorten the duration of the calls that get through. And that was not what they wanted to hear, really. They're like, more butts and chairs. I'm a bigger guy here, It's like saving money is not always what they want to hear in Paris. Which is an interesting. The CFO wants to hear it. The CEO probably wants to hear it, but they got blockers within that organization.
There's always blockers.
Stop you from getting it through.
Money, if you don't want to save money, that's fine. If you don't want to save time, then I'm probably, no matter what I tell you, it's probably not going to resonate.
Yeah,
Who wants
do
to
more with
tie-
the people you have. Repurpose the people. We'll keep you as a very important person overseeing hundreds of people or thousands of people. But like, let's make everybody more successful. It's a delicate cultural sale. So
Yes.
listen, wrap it up. Kind of final question for you. It, it would just be so enticing to be able to provide Terzo to all of our portfolio companies and the smaller SMBs, but it makes sense to go for the big guys. If you're just keeping yourself, only on Fortune 500, let's say, or Fortune 100, I guess 500, isn't there a big land and expand opportunity rather than go for the new logo? Like, how do you feel
Yeah, we have
about
to have a delicate balance.
how do you
Like
feel
last
about that balance?
Yeah, it's a
Adding
good
new logos versus landing and expanding.
I was putting it in the investor deck that I'm going to be sending out because I was like, look, here's the reality that I had to learn the hard way. And I was very confident about, I'll go get new logos, right? Because a lot of investors said, it's going to be so hard to get these new logos, right? And they always told me, you can't get new logos. So a lot of investors thought it was impossible to get these logos. So I made it a point to wake up every day and go say, nope, I'm going to go get these logos with this logo that no one knows. And I'm still going to get a deal done. That's a big deal. That was my mission early on. And the thing is that I realized now, going into year 5, but it's only 4 years since we landed our first customer, that going to get new logos and onboarding as a new supplier and getting all through those approvals is such a heavy lift that you're better off, if you want to get revenue in a short amount of time, you're much better just going deeper into your current customer base where there's already an MSA. You already have a contract in place. You just go across department and just go expand from 200 to 500 or 500 to 1 million or 1 million to 2 million. So we're spending a lot of our time and effort to have our senior people working on expansion. And I'm always working on expansion too, because it's much easier to go get another million from a customer who's paying $1 million than it is to go get a brand new logo million. So we have to have balance with that, but we're spending like 70% of our time on expansion, 30% on net new. And we know net new customer acquisition cost is high. You got to spend a lot of money on marketing. You got to spend a lot of money on sales. So we're also rethinking about how all that works. And we don't think that what you did in 2016 is going to work in 2025. It's just times are changing, right? And people want to be back in person again. So you know what decision I made, and we'll see if it works. It's a bet for the year. I said, you know what? We're going to go to 7 events in the first 4 months of the year, and we're going to go in person as much as possible. And we're going to invest the money and time there. And we're not going to do a lot of digital emailing or all this junk. We're just going to go in person and meet less people total than we would on Zoom, but quality touches, and we're actually going to get to know them. We're actually going to understand their problems. We're actually going to understand what their KPIs are. We're actually going to understand how they get paid. We're actually going to understand what they care about, to your point, because
Right.
maybe...
Are we being blocked? Are we saying the wrong thing? Someone's going to give you the real truth over a relationship, and that's essential to real enterprise sales. Like
Exactly. So we're in the field.
Sales.
We're in the field all the time now. We're going to be in the field, literally every week. And that is the key difference too, is that we're getting really close to these customers in all the different countries too, because we're in Europe, we're going to be in Dubai with some customers, and we're actually understanding exactly what they want to accomplish. That is a different model, relationship model too. We're not just like, hey, log in and swipe your credit card and use our solution. Like, we're trying to understand what they're trying to do the next 5 years. And do we fit into all of it? No, we fit into a big piece of it though, and are going to be a strategic data analytics solution over the next 5 years. And we're going to, be integrating with other new solutions too. And we're going to be part of the strategic roadmap. And that's always the number one goal. It's like, how do you become part of the strategic roadmap and get embedded with their actual business and solve real problems for them? And that's what we love to try to do, is solve real problems and bring short-term value. And it's important in today's world. People want answers now. They want instant gratification. No one wants to wait for anything.
Yeah. Well, they shouldn't have to. And if it's possible, they should be trying to make it in production, not just development. Well, listen, Brendan, great. Thanks for taking the time. This was fun. We should maybe come back in 6 months and cover a whole lot of
updates. It's to be a good year. I want to thank you for having me. I want to wish everyone the best too. 25. I think the last few years have been hard for founders and investors and LPs and the entire group of people in our ecosystem. Looking forward to 25 being a positive year for everybody, and hopefully we'll get to spend some quality time in person too. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, let's do that in person. All right, see you in Miami soon. Thanks, Brendan.